This is a call to order the February 3rd, 2021 regular meeting of the Ducktown Council. At this time, I'd like to do a roll call of council attorney and manager. This is Don Kingston, mayor.
Sandy Whitman, council member.
Can we go to the ones that are on Zoom?
Nancy Cavanis, council member.
Rob and Monica, I think you're both on mute.
Monica Thibodeau, Mayor Pro Tem.
Rob Mooney, council.
Joe Hurd, interim town manager.
Robert Hobbs, town attorney.
We also have with us tonight Donna Black, fire chief, Jeff Ackerman, police chief, Laurie Ackerman, town clerk, Kay Nickens, deputy town clerk, Christian Legger, our PIO, and Sandy Cross, our senior planner, who are also going to participate tonight. And before we start, I'd like to announce two changes to the agenda and get approval from council. The first is we're going to add the item E to the consent agenda, which is the approval of the audit that was presented to us at the last meeting. And number two, we're going to delete the first item on the closed session that deals with personnel. With so, I'd like to get a motion to, in fact, approve the change in the agenda.
So moved.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mayor votes aye. Councilmember.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau.
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Deputy Chief Bachelet and the three firefighters and our administrator from the fire department if they would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. We're going to go on to item number 2, public comments. If anyone in the audience would like to address the council, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. There will be a public hearing later, so if you're going to talk at the public hearing, you can wait till that point in time. We do have one that came in from email. Town clerk Laurie Ackerman will read that comment.
This is from Wesley Moyer. I would like to say congratulations and great job on hiring Drew Havens as your new town manager. I was a member of the Apex Town Council that hired Drew as our town manager. I worked with him for the next 3 to 4 years until the next election. He is a man of high integrity and character and was very helpful to me personally when I was on the council. Great job again, and if my business brings me to the OBX on a night of a council meeting, I will do my best to make it by and say hello. Have a great day and enjoy working with your new town manager.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Wesley. Any other comments? Any other comments, Christian? There be none, we'll close public comments. We're going to go on to item number 3, the consent agenda. This evening, it contains the minutes from the December 2nd, 2020 regular meeting, the minutes from the December 4th, 2020 special meeting, minutes from the December 10th, 2020 reconvened meeting, minutes from the December 11th, 2020 reconvened minutes, and a motion to approve the audit that was presented to the council in the January meeting. And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, we'll do a roll call vote. The mayor votes aye. Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau.
Aye.
Councilmember Whitman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And at this time, we're going to go to special presentations, and I'm going to turn it over to Fire Chief Donna Black.
Mayor, Council, anyone listening out in Zoom world, it's my privilege tonight to introduce our newest firefighter for Duck Fire Department. As you know, I came to you in the fall with a plea to get more help. Just the changing times, we've had a few folks out and still have one of our captains out at this point, and just with COVID and coverage, you heard my plea, and I thank you for supporting our position. So one of my favorite sayings, and the folks know, is every day's an interview. So Spencer came to us actually while we were holding pump classes at the fire department in the Bay during the fall, spread out and trying to get these classes in for these folks. And that's when he was first noticed, not just by actually our career staff, but some of the volunteers. He was engaged, everyone seemed to like him. He kind of fit in right away, not knowing we would even have a position at that time. And then the opportunity presented itself for Spencer to put in when we advertised, and he went through the process. And it's great that Jake's here tonight because, again, every day's an interview. So it's not just going through our physical agility. It's not just being interviewed by your peers and your potential bosses, but it's how you carry yourself. So Spencer stuck out, I know, because he came to a practice session on how to do the physical agility, and Jake was teaching that day the physical agility and overseeing it. And Jake gave him pointers. And he came back to the actual testing session and listened to Jake about those pointers and how to do better on the test. That's exactly what we're looking for, right? We're looking for people that can take information, use it, improve upon it. And he interviewed a fair amount before we ever got him in the room with the actual interview questions. So Spencer comes from us from actually Newport News. He's the oldest of 6 children. He lives in Nags Head. And sorry, Elizabeth City Fire, but we stole him from Elizabeth City Fire, where he was there from February 2019. He's got an exercise science degree from Lindenwood, right? And he started with us January 4th. He's fit right in. He's not only a great guy, but a good firefighter, and it's been enjoyable to have him. So we'll bring him up, and we're gonna pin him. And then I'll let Spencer say a couple words.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody. Chief pretty much said it all. I'm very excited to be part of the team, and I've had a big warm welcome from day one at the practice test for the physical agility test. So thank you all again for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Congratulations, Spencer. Welcome to the town.
Welcome.
And thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Moving to item number 5, public hearing. A public hearing discussion and consideration of SE-20-005, an application by Sunlight on Coast LLC for 2 special exceptions relating to fill and grading activities associated with the installation of a stormwater management system at 1170 Duck Road. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Interim Town Manager Joe Hurd.
Yeah, this time we'll open the quasi-judicial hearing on this application. I'd like to go over some information that you need to keep in mind with regard to this type of hearing. First, when considering an application for a special exception, the town council sits as a quasi-judicial body. Therefore, certain safeguards must be instituted in order to give the applicant a fair hearing. The applicant has the right to cross-examine witnesses and offer rebuttal evidence. The procedure of the ordinance must be followed. The council members may question any witness at any time during the hearing. Questions from the floor will not be permitted except by cross-examination from any of the sworn witnesses once recognized to speak. A member must not vote on the application if the outcome of the matters being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct and substantial impact on the member. If such a direct and substantial impact exists, the member should disclose it at this time and be excused from consideration of the matter. If any of the members present have had any contact with anyone prior to the hearing in which the particulars of the application were discussed, please remember that you must base your decision on the application entirely on the facts presented during this hearing and disregard the particulars discussed with the applicant or another party. A member must base his or her decision on the evidence presented during the hearing. Any member who has developed a predetermined opinion or bias on the outcome of this matter before the hearing must not participate in the decision on this application. Critical facts used to determine the outcome of this hearing must be based on sworn statements made by witnesses during the hearing. While you may be presented with facts or with information before or during the hearing, such as copies of unsworn statements contained in letters, emails, and the like, such unsworn evidence can only be used to supplement other sworn evidence presented during this hearing. Unsworn evidence can never be used as the sole basis for your decision. At this time, the town clerk will swear in the applicant and any other witnesses who plan to offer testimony or evidence in this case.
Those that are going to speak, please stand. Raise your right hand. After I give the oath, say I do or I swear. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Will you make the presentation? Okay. So at this time, Joe Hurd will make a presentation on behalf of the town.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Kingston. Members of council who are present, both virtually and in person, as well as folks visiting with us, citizens who are joining us here today, and as well as visiting on Zoom. Wanted to start off just by giving some context to this particular application. This is 1170 Duck Road, so this is a property located along Currituck Sound, the area, and that stretched south of Aqua, part of the Four Seasons development. These are one of the houses on the west side there. Subject property itself contains an existing single-family residence. Property's a little less than a third of an acre in size, currently zoned single-family residential, and there's nothing that's proposed to change to those basic improvements as part of this application. Lot's approximately 100 feet wide and 130 feet in depth to the sound. Again, with the house was constructed in 2008. Looking at the surroundings, you have other single-family residences located both north and south at 1168 Duck Road and 1172 Duck Road. Very similarly situated properties there. Across Duck Road to the east, you have a large undeveloped property that's part of the Four Seasons development. Appears to be mostly wooded if you're looking at it from Duck Road, but the property also contains a large community septic field that actually serves 19 properties within that development. So that's the sort of the context of that. Everything around is single-family residential in the direct area around it. As far as the application itself, in this instance, we have a property owner who's seeking to correct or make some improvements regarding some issues they're facing on the property. There is existing erosion that's occurring at the rear of the property and leading to runoff heading directly toward Currituck Sound. And in order to try to improve that situation, the applicant is looking at installing an innovative underground stormwater management set of features there. And as part of that, it requires that to be leveled off. So what is being proposed is the installation of a 5-foot high stone retaining wall that would go in the approximate location of the existing wooden retaining wall. And again, we're not talking about the bulkhead that's directly on the sound. We're talking about a wall that would be up above that and further to the east. And by doing this, it allows some underground stormwater management. They'll be capturing stormwater. It'll be funneled into the system underground, would be released into the surrounding area at a slower pace than if it was just running directly off into the sound, in this case, down the hill. So that's really the intent of why they're doing this. And just wanted to give a little bit further description. Let me pull up the site plan. So we're looking at the site plan. You can see the large gray area is the existing house. And then what you see to the area to the right or west on this site plan is what's going to be the final product. So what's involved with this proposal is the removal of approximately 400 square feet of the existing wooden decking on the property and 518 square feet of existing impervious stone patio. So again, these are things that are contributing to that runoff by, when the water hits it, it flows off it and flows faster because it's impermeable surface. So after doing that, the applicants are looking at replacing that with the installation of total of 912 feet of pervious patio that has a subsurface base allowing for stormwater infiltration and gradual release, as I stated, into the adjoining ground. Some of that is underneath the existing house. You've got a porch and deck there on the back, and then some of that is in the lawn area adjoining. Would also involve, as I mentioned before, construction of a stone retaining wall approximately 5 feet in height, as well as some backfill behind that. There's also a sunken lawn area that exists to the northern part of at the rear of the property there, in that northern corner. And then there would be some filling and leveling of the lawn area behind that retaining wall. And the wall doesn't extend across the entire property. You can see that it cuts short approximately 16 feet from the southern property line. It bends back in. And so there at the southern line, it will have more of the natural slope going down. They will not be adding fill in that area. That was an attempt for the applicants to minimize the amount of fill that they have on the property, or that they would be adding to the property. So within that area, you can see you have a sort of a patio area there where there's pervious pavers, a swimming pool and hot tub. Those are existing improvements. And then, like I said, a lot of the subsurface, you have stormwater management improvements. And then up in on this plan upper, but it's actually the southern, sort of the southwest corner of the property there, you can see some black lines and things like that. There are actually some additional stormwater management improvements that are proposed to capture some of the stormwater coming off the roof of the house and running that into a chamber. It goes down all the way toward the southern line, but then it's captured by a swale which carries it into a lower area between the retaining wall and the bulkhead. So again, it's giving all that stormwater an opportunity to filter into the ground by those improvements that are being proposed. So the reason we're here tonight is that the applicant is requesting two special exceptions as they relate to this project. So one of which is simply that the town ordinance does not allow a retaining wall or bulkhead to be used to build up and support new fill. That would be occurring in this case where they would be adding some backfill behind the bulkhead to bring up a little bit of that lawn area where the permeable pavers are. The other factor is that the town presently limits fill to no more than 3 feet in height. And there are areas here directly behind that 5-foot high wall where the fill material would have a depth of approximately 5 feet in those areas directly behind the wall. That tapers up to a much lower area as it levels out more toward the house. But those are the special exceptions that the applicant is requesting this evening from those two requirements. So going back, just for the record, did want to note that the public hearing that we're in and about to get into more detail on was properly advertised in the Coastland Times, as well as meeting notices sent to all owners, sign posted on the property, as well as notice posted here at Town Hall and the town website. And now we'll get into the findings. As council's aware, for any special exception application, the town ordinance contains a list of standards, and the council has to make findings on whether these standards are met. And basically, if you find that all of these different criteria are met, then the application should be approved by the council if they're all met. However, if you feel that there's clearly one or more that are not met, then the appropriate action would be to deny the application in that instance. So they have to meet all of the findings. So in our ordinance, we have several things, and I'll just walk through these and summarize the findings that the planning board had after their review of this application. First, the site for the proposed fill is otherwise adequate in size, shape, and other characteristics to accommodate the proposed project. So we did note that there's not a requirement for the retaining wall to meet minimum setback requirements, so that's not an issue in this case. We do note that overall, when we do the math, the proposed filling, grading, and improvements will actually reduce the footprint of the existing improvements and the amount of impervious coverage and lot coverage on the property. So we saw that as an improvement. We do note that the applicant will have to obtain a CAMA minor permit for the project from the Division of Coastal Management. That'll be a separate step that we cover with a condition. So with that being the case, the planning board found that the subject property is of adequate size to accommodate the proposed project, and they felt the application meets finding 1. Second, the applicant has demonstrated the requirements of this chapter are unreasonable or impractical due to the necessity for fill, lot shape, topographic features, location of mature vegetation, or location and characteristics of existing improvements on the lot. In other words, this is not as definitive as it would be for a variance, but there has to be something about the proposal where there is some type of hardship or difficulty in meeting the town's requirements with this, that the requirements are unreasonable in allowing the proposal. The scope of the project noted by the applicant, you see that there are existing issues with settlement and erosion in the areas where the existing deck and patio are. So we do have an existing issue that the applicant is trying to address. And the proposed improvements are intended to stabilize the property and improve these erosion issues. We note that the town's current standards prevent these objectives by allowing a lower height, by only allowing a lower height, and by limiting the amount of fill that can be, fill supported behind the retaining wall. Those being the case, the planning board found the standards prevent a reasonable and positive solution to address these issues, and that it meets finding 2. Third, the amount of fill is the minimum necessary to accommodate the proposed project. While noting that there's no particular magic to the elevation that was chosen for this project as far as the height of the lawn area that was chosen, although it is the existing height, they're not looking at building that up any further. The addition of the fill appears to be consistent with the height that is necessary to support the permeable patio. That does have to be a flat surface in order to function properly, as well as the stormwater infiltration system. We noted that the site plan also shows as I mentioned previously, the length of the retaining wall and the way it's being brought back into the property. Originally, the applicants had proposed that wall extending all the way to the southern boundary, but after further review, did reduce that, so it's about 16 feet from the southern side property line. So they have made attempts in their design to minimize the area where they would be adding fill and preserving more of the natural slope in that area to the southern part. So the planning board did feel that they had made appropriate attempts to minimize the amount of fill in this case, and the board found that the application meets finding 3. Fourth, the proposed fill will not negatively impact adjacent properties or the surrounding area. We do note that presently much of the stormwater runoff heads downhill directly toward the Currituck Sound, and some of the improvements being removed are contributing factors to that runoff. The stormwater management system proposed will capture a great deal of that runoff before it goes elsewhere, reducing that stormwater runoff from the property. So there are net positive impacts with the installation of this system. While the applicant's information does not specifically address how the retaining wall and fill will impact adjoining properties to the north and south, the applicant has received a letter of approval for the project from the Four Seasons and Duck Property Owners Association. You also have copies in your packet, in addition to that, written support of the proposal from both of the adjoining property owners. So the applicant did get in touch with them, and they provided that information. So in light of the fact that the project will be capturing a lot of the existing runoff, it certainly seemed that this would be a net benefit to any adjoining property owners, and the fact that the adjoining owners have said they're okay with it led the planning board toward a finding that the application meets finding 4. Fifth, the special exception application is consistent with applicable goals, policies, and objectives in the town's adopted CAMA land use plan and vision statement. And we go into some more detail and later on in pages 6 in particular of the staff report, but just summarized by saying the board found that the proposal is consistent with those key elements of the comprehensive and land use plan and DUC's 2027 vision, and that the application therefore meets finding 5. And finally, requirement that the applicant has submitted a drainage plan consistent with the requirements. The applicant has, and you have in your packet, a copy of a stormwater management plan and site plan prepared by House Engineering for the applicants. It highlights all of the stormwater improvements. You also have a page that contains a lot of project specifications showing how this system will work. And with that, the planning board found the applicant has submitted an adequate stormwater management plan by a qualified North Carolina licensed engineer, and the application meets finding 6. So with all that in mind, at their meeting on January the 13th, 2021, the planning board members voted unanimously to recommend approval of this special exception application, subject to the following conditions. First, that the proposed retaining wall must be certified by North Carolina licensed engineer. That's part of the building permit requirements due to the height of the wall. Second, the applicant must obtain a CAMA minor permit from the North Carolina Division of Coastal Management prior to the issuance of a land disturbance permit for the fill, grading, or building permit for the retaining wall. Third, the applicant must submit required application materials and obtain land disturbance and building permits prior to commencing work. And fourth, all areas of land disturbance must be stabilized prior to issuance of a certificate of completion for the project. Mayor, that completes my presentation on the prepared remarks, but I'd certainly be glad to answer any questions the council members might have at this time. I will also note that the applicants, both the owners of the property as well as their designer contractors working with them, are present this evening and can provide additional information to you as well.
Joe, I got a question. Is there going to be any disturbance between the proposed rock wall and the existing bulkhead for the sound? Is that going to be disturbed or terraced or backfilled?
You may have a little bit of grade. What you'll see is the proposed stone retaining wall is generally, and it's in a similarly situated to the existing wooden wall that's in not as good a shape. But there are differences in how you can see there are areas where it bows out. So it's not identical. It's not totally straight across the front of the property there. It appears on this, there will be at least a little bit of work being done in the area below there to shape those swales out a little bit. But not that's not really the focal point of the project. The focal point is mostly the improvements that would be to the east of that wall, up above it, not below it. But there would be some minimal grading work there.
Joe, the existing wall that's there now, that's holding the pool in place, how much lower is it than that wall that's going across the side of the pool?
Applicant may be able to answer that a little better, but it's my understanding it'll be fairly similar to that. But applicant can provide you with some more information on that.
I have a question.
Monica?
Thank you. This is Monica Thibodeau. I just was wondering, and a couple questions about and this may be for the applicant, but sort of thinking about the idea of using the stone versus, what is there a better thing about using stone, and what is it tied into, or is it just because it's stone, it's a little different? I was wondering if it was tied in with deep pilings, or, if it was tied into kind of teed in. That's a question, but I guess a question you might be able to answer, Joe, is when the water is taken in this system of water capture and, stormwater management, am I understanding it correctly that it's all happening in the front of their property, sort of like in the stone kind of area where it's kind of coming off? Or I'm just curious, I'm having just want to understand that, where that's coming out and then it's all the water's designed to be contained on their property. That's what I'm inferring, but I just want to confirm that. And the difference between, maybe you could answer it, the difference between a bulkhead and a retaining wall.
Okay. As far as the terminology, I'll start with the easy one. That's the last question. A bulkhead is, when we use that term, we're referring to something that directly abuts a shoreline.
Right.
Okay, so that would be something that interfaces between land and water typically.
Okay.
A retaining wall is just a structure that is supporting fill in some way or another. But that could be anywhere on the property and, is used on all kinds of properties. It doesn't have to be a waterfront property or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Regarding the other question, we do have some, and I will let the applicant contractor talk with you in a little bit more detail about that, but you understood the two questions. They were, one of which, what is happening to the water that is captured in this infiltration system? How is that being released? Is that one of them is basically that. And then the other is, how is the retaining wall itself, the stone wall, because it's a different from what we would typically see than with a wooden wall.
Right.
How is that being supported and tied back so it doesn't just topple over with the weight of what's behind it? Is that correct? Okay.
I mean, it's 5 feet and everything. So just wanted to get that, because I'm imagining, and I'm not to speak for the applicant or anything, but I'm just thinking out loud that, the engineers have been designing this. So I just would like to be let in on how that's handled.
Okay. And you do, so I will ask the applicant's contractor to come up and speak to those issues in more detail. But I did want to point out, while he's talking, you may want to refer to, you have in your packets a document prepared by House Engineering that has the specifications for this system.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be a good document to be looking at as he's describing. He's ready to go, but let me just ask, were there any other questions that I would be, maybe you're more for me?
I'm not sure if this is yours or his. He's showing on his detail the wall. Can you go back to the drawing of the, where the pool is? The slide. Okay, he's got the existing pool there and he's got a retaining wall across there. On this drawing here, it shows a distance between the pool and that retaining wall on his detail. How does that fit in with the setbacks there? The pool, it's showing that wall right along the pool, but if you go to this one in the middle, on the bottom, Joe, it's showing it back in ways to tie it back, that wall into something.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll let the applicant talk to that. As far as setbacks go, in this instance, they're not proposing to move.
I misspoke myself on setbacks,
Okay.
but he's showing it right against
As
the
far as
pool.
the setback between the pool
Yes.
and the distance between. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, Mayor, then I think it might be appropriate. This might be a good segue to shift over to the applicant. And we have with us tonight Jordan Daniker with Evolve Design and Build, who is the contractor and designer for this project.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Again, my name is Jordan Daniker with the Evolve Design to Build. We're based out of Currituck. So I'll try to answer all you guys' questions as thoroughly as I can. I don't know if you want me to start with yours first or the lady on Zoom.
Monica, you can hit first. She got hers in first.
Okay. So the first question, I'll kind of give you a little bit of a long-winded answer on the bulkhead versus retaining wall. So people refer to that term bulkhead regionally in our area. It's a seawall, right? So seawalls can be built out of numerous products. For instance, if you were in a more northern area like Lake Ontario or things like that, they still build bulkheads or seawall out of retaining wall block. It's basically industry best practice in the area. And the reason you don't see them as much in our coastal setting is due to the costs. And up in northern climates, you see them more because wood products don't last in that harsh environment. So it's not necessarily the fact that one's a bulkhead and one's a retaining wall. It is two different types of items in the way that they work, but it's basically demographically challenging for certain areas in certain parts of the country, and then cost prohibits that use in certain areas because people obviously want to get by with the best possible option for the least expensive, route. As far as the retaining wall is concerned, when you look at the cross section of the retaining wall, you notice that the wall has a batter back to it, and everybody's been to Home Depot and they actually see the little lips on the backside of those blocks, and that is actually that is not a structural aspect. That is just what sets the batter for the course. The wall structure part is made to be segmental so that it can free move. The ground moves in various ways that we don't see every day, and you can notice that when you go by certain concrete walls or wooden structures and they appear to be cracked or tiebacks appear to be broke, things shift. The advantage of a retaining wall that's a segmental system is it adapts to that environment. The changes are very subtle. It's not something you would go by there and see on a year-to-year basis. It's something you see long-term. So while the cost is more expensive and you see a lot of people using wood products, the retaining wall being the concrete segmental product is a better long-term alternative. Then in the cross section, what you'll notice is these grid sections. They go back every 2 to 3 courses based on what an engineer specs. In some cases, people think that that's a tieback and it's set into the wall. The main reason that we let that be set into the wall is so the homeowner or whoever we're building the wall for can see that we did adhere to the standards, and the geogrid is what it's called, is inside the wall. That actually grid does not stabilize or tie to the wall as a tieback does to a bulkhead. It supports the soil content, if you think of it like a reinforcement aspect, as a webbing, a spider web, it reinforces the labor. So to answer your question on the structural stability of the wall, you'll notice that in the drawing, you'll see a slope away from it. That's called a toe slope. So there's more embedment on this wall than there would be of other typical bulkhead alternatives where there would just be the post in the ground. The actual entire wall is embedded and sitting on its own foundation. So structurally, this wall is way superior. It's just that in our area, it's not a typical practice because we can get away with lesser standards because we don't have the environment that others may have throughout the country. And then hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
And then what the next question you had was addressing the stormwater management plan. And that was the big thing when coming here that we wanted to prove, is that we were able to manage that stormwater. You know, I've been a longtime resident of Currituck County. I've been there my whole life. And stormwater and its coastal impacts have always been an issue. And unfortunately, in our area, finding somebody that's capable of, you know, minimizing the impacts and being able to provide a good solution is very limited. And as technology advances and people are able to bring more things to the table, we're starting to see these pervious systems. And I would think in our area, one of the challenging things in trying to sell a pervious system, which means that water is allowed to go through the surface. So concrete, let me back up for a minute. Concrete as a whole would be non-pervious. It doesn't allow water to go through. Versus this permeable system, it has gaps, okay? And that size of the gap determines the infiltration rate of the stormwater to go into the system. So basically like a drain, the larger the gap, the faster the water is going to infiltrate the system. And what we have done as a coastal community, not just in Duck, but throughout the Nags Head and, you know, even, you know, Southern Shores, is we've adapted a standard of these turf stones. You can go everywhere and you see these cross sections of turf stones that we've laid on the beach. And unfortunately, people didn't put those in correctly and they filled with sand and they haven't been maintained properly. So it's given permeable systems a negative, it's given it a negative mindset. When you look at it, people are like, oh, I don't want that. Well, installed correctly and done with the right product, this system is far superior and basically gets rid of the stormwater faster than any type of sheet drainage from a or drain pipe can, because it goes directly into the system. So imagine it as the entire surface being a drain. The system itself does not require the storm chambers, and that's sometimes hard for, not that I'm an engineer by no means, I'm just a good old Curry Tuck boy, but I like to make things happen. And I think for sometimes some engineers want to over-engineer it so that the system itself will keep up with the infiltration rates. The pavers are designed for, a 100-year event, but we put the extra capture zones, if you look at those SC 310 storm chambers, we put that as an overflow point so that the event of a catastrophic event, there would be no failure. So it's essentially cheap insurance. The system itself, in my opinion, it depends on who you talk to, it will never actually utilize those storm cells, but they're there for a cheap insurance, and the homeowner was willing to go the extra mile, which added a significant cost to the project to make sure that they were doing their part to make, this a safe stormwater management plan for their neighbors and also the community, in my opinion. So is that all your questions?
I believe so. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. What was yours? I'm sorry.
My question is the wall that's behind the pool, right alongside the pool.
Yes, sir.
How do you put that in right next to the pool? If I'm looking at the drawing that you gave us here, which is a typical, showing the distance between where something is and you got drainage underneath there. And it looks like there's pretty good footing in there too.
Yeah, so you're saying that the wall is going to, and I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, your concern is that the wall butts directly up to the pool, and how is that stable, right?
Correct, because you only have X amount of feet between there and your drink, what you're calling that dip in there for the excess water to flow down.
Right, so what it is you can't see it in the drawing, but there's returns on the wall. So the wall actually returns back into the side of the pool. So there's almost a.
Can you go back to that drawing?
I got a cross section.
The house one. This one here with the.
Sorry.
Just in case you need to. This is the site. This is the specs.
Okay, all right, yep, sorry about that.
See where you got the curved wall, then you got the straight wall along the pool.
This curve wall here?
Nope, the straight one going alongside the pool in the hot tub.
Right here?
Yes. Nope, keep coming back.
Right here?
Nope, go north. Right there, that one. Nope, not the wing wall.
This one?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is actually, that wall is, although when you look at the 3D rendering, it looks like a continuation of the retaining wall. That wall is already there. That's actually the pool itself. That's the stone concrete wall. So what we're going to do is right now it's veneered with a special stone. I'd rather call, Kristen knows I don't like the stone there, but we're going to veneer it to match and make it look appropriate. So it's actually structurally already there.
Okay, so this detail here is not what's going alongside the pool.
There was a wall in front of that poolside wall, which was a wood. Yeah, that was a wood retaining wall. And so really it wasn't really doing anything but kind of hiding the foundation of the pool because, unfinished concrete just doesn't look well. So so this wall, thank you again. So this wall you see right here, can you see that cursor?
Yeah.
Okay. That is the actual poolside wall. But to speak on the stability portion of that, right here, which you don't see, obviously that's part of the pool wall as well. Parallel to that pool wall will be returns from the original wall. This wall here is just getting veneered with stone. That's it.
And where are you exceeding the 5 foot in fill? You can show us on that drawing there.
Well, the reason we exceeded the 5 foot of fill is this area here. I don't know if we have an aerial. I know
I can see in this one right here.
Okay, there's a deck there now, right?
Right.
So underneath that deck, that slopes down, right? Because the deck posts make up that difference. So when I have to build a raised patio, we fill that So that's where, honestly, that storm chamber is going to come from too, in that area. That's where the holding cell will be. The system, the entire system itself contains all its own stormwater runoff. So there shouldn't, the minimized sheet drain, the sheet drainage will be minimized, being anything that runs off a non-pervious surface.
You're saying that that chamber's underneath that flat where your cursor is now?
It was originally, but we decided to put it underneath this green space here because the engineers allowed me to do that because I was concerned about the stability of the wall from my own building practices. I wanted it to be as strong as possible, so I didn't want anything to interfere with it. I wanted to have enough embedment of stone and geogrid there without interfering with the system. So we put it underneath that fire pit there. And there's actually one on the south side as well. If you look at the stormwater plan.
Right, but that's in the grass area.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So what you're saying is you're raising that section up because that patio there now is hollow underneath.
Yes, sir, that's correct. It's just a deck. So obviously the posts raise it up and underneath it's a gentle slope to the bulkhead. That's correct. Do you have any other questions?
Any other questions from council for Jordan? Think you're good to go.
I have a question for Joe. I'm sorry. One more.
That's okay. I just wanted to say one thing, for the town. This is my first time doing a special application permit for this town. And I think that the town members and the board should know how much Sandy and Joe advocate for your town. I got to tell you, it's extremely exhausting as a contractor, but you couldn't have better people advocating for your town. So, Sandy has just been super helpful, and I just think that they deserve some recognition no matter where the project goes. Boy, it's been challenging for me, but I was lucky to have them provide the information. So kudos on having such good advocates for your community, okay?
Thank you for your comments, Jordan.
Yeah.
I think Monica's got another question for you. Monica, do you have another question?
I had one for Joe.
Oh, Joe.
And you can go ahead.
Yeah, you could probably just take it from, my quick question is simply, we're working on this and just to understand, kind of getting it down to grass levels, grassroots. We're looking at this as a redo of something. I think the papers, say obviously it's grandfathered just on lot size and everything else, but then the fact that we're trying to preserve something that's already existing and improve upon it so that we're, that's kind of the spirit of what we're doing, right?
Yeah, this was something that, when Mr. Daniker first came and sat down with us to talk about the project many months ago, we just saw this as a, very interesting and innovative way to take a look at stormwater management. So certainly the intent of the project is good in terms of resolving some existing erosion, stormwater issues that are on the site. So staff certainly sees this as a very positive project.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to see if there are if the applicants themselves or any other sworn witnesses would like to make a presentation. Okay. Actually, I would like to bring the applicants up to ask a couple questions about this hearing, if you don't mind. Yeah, if you don't mind, yes.
And if you would introduce yourselves when you go to the mic. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Replogle.
And Kristen Replogle.
Thank you. I just had a couple questions. As you know, we're in a state of emergency. This is by law known as a remote meeting, meaning that we have 3 council members participating remotely. So the law requires that the town has to provide special requirements when having this type of hearing, called a quasi-judicial hearing during a remote meeting, and I wanted to go over those with you. First, the town has to provide the right of individuals to a hearing and decision during the emergency. Second, the town has to ensure that all persons subject to the quasi-judicial proceeding who have standing to participate in the hearing have been given notice of the hearing and consent to the remote meeting. And third, that all due process rights of the parties affected are protected. So I'd like to ask you, first of all, the town feels like that it has provided you with a hearing and decision during this emergency, and I wanted to see if you agree with that.
Yes.
Secondly, I wanted to say that the town feels like it has provided you with notice of this hearing and that you have consented to have this hearing during a remote meeting.
Yes.
And third, the town has made every effort to protect your due process rights, which are rights to a notice in the hearing with regard to this quasi-judicial hearing. I wanted to see if you agree with that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had for you, unless you wanted to say anything further about the application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so not seeing anyone else who wanted to say anything else during this hearing, who are sworn witnesses. Are there any remaining questions from any of the council members? Okay, so at this time I will close the public hearing. And at this point, the council members may deliberate. Now, just give you some reminders. First of all, you will have the opportunity to review the evidence that's been presented here. And also, as part of your findings, you will need to make findings that all the criteria that Joe went over that are in the staff report to grant a special exception have been met by the evidence presented. And also that your findings that you have met the requirements, as I read a few minutes ago, dealing with having this type of hearing in a remote meeting. Also, the conditions that were recommended by the planning board, you have the option to include those in your approval should you decide to approve the application for the special exception. So having said all that, if there is a motion to, or an inclination to approve the application, I have a typed out motion that I can read that would cover all of that, that I could certainly read for whoever would like to make that motion. Likewise, if there's an inclination to deny the application, I have a similar motion that I can read.
Thank you,
That's it.
Robert.
Thank you for doing that.
It's open for deliberation. As Robert said, he does have a motion that we will have him read before we move. But certainly let's open for the discussion and deliberation right now by council. Are there any further comments?
No, I'm pretty satisfied with the information at this point. Appreciate everything. I'm in favor of having Robert do the motion. So I'll make a motion that we,
We're going to hold on the motion.
okay, great. Someone else can make it then.
Thank you, Monica. Well, if there's no further deliberation or comments, I'm going to ask Robert if he will read the motion, and then we'll have a council member move it.
There's also one other thing I want to mention too. There's another requirement, because this is a remote meeting during a state of emergency, that there's a 24-hour comment period after the public hearing is closed, during which the town can receive additional public comments concerning the public hearing. And so you'll hear in the proposed motion, or in the motion that I read, that that 24-hour period is recognized. And if there are no comments received from no substantive comments received from the public during that 24-hour period, then the motion, if it's approved, would proceed on, the permit would be issued. If there are comments received, they're substantive in nature during that 24-hour period, then the motions can say that the action is deferred until the council can then meet again, either in a regular meeting or a special meeting, to consider those comments and to decide whether it wants to ratify or confirm the action it previously took, or to make it some other decision. Keeping in mind that the evidence that you are, as a reminder, what I said in the very beginning, is that the evidence you are supposed to go by for making a decision must be sworn evidence. So if somebody presents comments, they're welcome to do so, but if they're not sworn testimony, you cannot, for example, you would not be able to change your mind and make a different decision based solely on that unsworn evidence, because that's contrary to the requirements that I read earlier on. You could certainly decide to reopen the hearing or do something else and have sworn testimony, but the usefulness of comments like that, especially if they're not sworn, I would think would be somewhat limited, but I think you would still be required to review them if they come in with that 24-hour period. So sorry, that's sort of convoluted and lengthy, but that's the law that we're been given based on this emergency. So I'll read the motion. I make a motion that the application for special exception number SE-20-005 be approved, including the adoption of the proposed findings of fact set forth in the staff report with respect to compliance with the required special exception criteria and including the conditions recommended by the planning board as set forth in the staff report. The council also finds that the quasi-judicial hearing that was conducted in this case met all the requirements of the Town of Duck Code ordinances and the North Carolina General Statutes, including section 166A-19.24F of the North Carolina General Statutes that pertains to quasi-judicial hearings held during a remote council meeting, which is what we're in now. The mayor and clerk are authorized to execute a special exception permit that is prepared by town staff consistent with this resolution, provided, however, that if the town receives any written public comments on the subject of this quasi-judicial hearing within 24 hours after the time that the hearing was closed, the action taken under this motion shall be suspended and delayed until the next meeting of the council for consideration of the written comments and further action if necessary. Otherwise, absent the town's receipt of any further written public comments within 24 hours, no further action by this council will be necessary to give effect to the approval of the special exception.
Thank you, Robert. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor that was read by our town attorney and moved by Councilmember Whitman? There being done, we'll go for a roll call vote. The mayor votes aye. Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanis?
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney?
Aye.
Councilmember Whitman?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Christian, John, and Jordan for attending this evening. Good luck with your project. Going to move on to item number 6, old business items deferred from previous meetings. Discussion, consideration of awarding a contract and authorizing the town manager to execute such contract for construction of a rain garden wetland on the town park property. Joe?
I guess I'm just up here to close out the documents we just had, but while I'm here, I'll introduce you to the individual who was responsible for that bid process, Sandy Cross, who can share with you the information.
Good evening, Council.
Hi, Sandy.
So long awaited. It took us a very long time to get the grant approved from CCAP, but we finally did, and we put this little project out to bid in December. We sent it to 13 different local contractors, and including Emerald Forest, who is our beach grass planter for the oceanfront. Gave them a little over 30 days, and we received 4 bids, as you can see in the staff report. Caribbean Landscaping is by far the cheapest, the low bid. However, they did not provide me with any references that were similar in nature, as in a rain garden, a wet garden, wetland. So while they are the lowest bid, I did go ahead and do a little bit of research on Emerald Forest, who I am very familiar with, but normally I'm only dealing with them on the oceanfront. When I did some of the research on the work that they do, they typically do more wetland stuff and living shorelines and marsh restorations than they do oceanfront stuff. So my question to council would be to give staff direction on whether you would prefer that we contract with Caribbean Landscaping or Emerald Forest.
Are you now ready for questions?
Yes.
So in other words, basically, we know we're getting a grant for 2,000, so basically the price difference is 6,000 versus 12,000. And
Right.
even though Caribbean has not done this work before, there are pretty detailed specs on what needs to be done.
There are, and our engineer has said this isn't rocket science. But even when I talked to Emerald Forest about some of the projects that they've done, they're like, well, it's spec'd this and we did that and we don't recommend doing that kind of stuff anymore. So, you know, there is a little bit of experience involved with planting wetland species. And in that regard, I would err on the side of experience. We can certainly have Caribbean do this and get them experience. Because I expect there may be some other projects in the future. But our experience with Emerald Forest has always been good. In instances where they had not planted beach grass deep enough, they warrantied our grasses and came back and planted again at no charge. I don't have enough experience with Caribbean to say that would be the case if we have a failure of some sort. And without having a lot of knowledge myself about wetlands, I'm going to have a hard time overseeing them and making sure they're doing it correctly. And I might go back to CCAP. Yes, we have a $2,000 grant, but our representative seems to think that he may be able to get us some more money if there is funding available this year.
So Caribbean, excuse me, hasn't done any of this, but Emerald has.
Emerald has done extensively. In fact, they were just named in the Virginia pilot for a...
That's the same one that I read about.
Well, I just found it today. Norfolk Southern invested in a living shoreline where they planted 34,000 marsh grasses. And, you know, as we go into the future project at on Duck Road, the living shoreline, you know, we can actually potentially see some of the work that they do here in Duck because I expect they'll be bidding on that in the future.
Sandy, my question is, I guess where this conversation is heading is, what does failure look like?
Failure looks like dead plants.
Okay. Is it also a collapsing of the area because it hasn't been properly excavated or tiered or whatever is necessary in terms of sculpting it before the plants are introduced? I mean,
Potentially, but I would think it would be more of the inability, like if they didn't excavate enough or they didn't excavate properly, then the water may not get to where it needs to get to in order to do what our intent is.
okay. And could that potentially exacerbate the flooding situation there?
They'd have to really screw up.
Or in the middle of town?
Yeah, I don't think, worst case scenario, it wouldn't be any worse than it is now. But if they follow the grading specifications, you know, that, I don't know that there's one, you know, that would be different for one over another.
You know, and quite honestly, like Caribbean has impressed me thus far with the village. They were here the first of the year and they got the weeds out of every single bed. So I have no doubt that they would be diligent in getting this project complete. It's just a matter of experience versus not experience. And then there's a cost factor that's associated with that.
So we could possibly have an $8,000 failure.
Possibly.
It
But
looks
I
like,
assume the contract has guarantees in it. I mean, if they don't build it to specification, if they build a specification, then shame on us if it fails. But if they don't build a specification, I would assume that they'd have to redo.
yeah, but how do, my question is, you lose $8,000 or half the cost is plants, say. We lose all the plants, how are we gonna get them to come back? We've already paid them, we won't know for a year if the plants are gonna last.
So that would be the
my
case.
worry.
I would assume that would be the case with anybody that planted the plants, but
I mean,
I don't think it's a question of bringing them back. They're going to be here anyway. You know what I mean? Put some language in the contract that says, you know, protects us a little bit if they do this really badly. But I'm not unconvinced about Emerald Forest. I think Sandy's points are well taken.
I have a question, if I could, about the specifications we're talking about. These were pretty specifically designed for the area. It sounds like maybe they didn't identify the exact plants or.
So there were specific plants identified in the plan.
Okay, sorry, I didn't notice that, but I mean, it looked really detailed, so that's probably where the not rocket science is coming in. And just to talk bluntly about it all, I like the idea of using a local vendor. And like you say, you've been impressed with what they've done and they were an unknown before. And we use them, part of that decision for me when we hired them to do the middle of the sidewalk was to get some, it's a little bit of depth in our
Absolutely.
associations, right? So that same logic is giving, I'm kind of like Rob in that I don't, with the other one, what I'm hearing is we're going to get a lot of like innate experience and, something you can really, maybe really learn a lot from their experience versus, like you say, having someone, kind of come in and just do it to the specs and see what happens. I'm hearing that maybe the people that, have done it before might, even, want to modify something on the spec or certainly, have an experience with like the spec. The benefit I could see out of them would be the more experience would be simply that they might be able to give us some, we could work in this relationship would allow us to get some knowledge that we could give to the citizens. Do you know what I mean? Like without giving away the secrets, I feel like best practices. And if they're that good at it, they could be a resource for future education, because I think we're going to need more and more of that as everybody, we're both shorelines, very important.
Absolutely. And I mean, my experience with Pete McClintock, who owns Emerald Forest, is such that, if I know when this has happened, and I can certainly have him available, like we could probably make it an educational piece while they're actually doing the work.
I mean, I don't know how many more applicants, how many more areas in our town are, in the similar situation that little pocket is, and it's low. And I'm thinking about it right around the waterfront shops, man, they've really, struggled. That's extreme, but there might be other places in the town, like residential. Can you envision these kind of things going in?
Well, I mean, not only residential, I mean, we're talking about, and Joe's going to touch on the Encore grant and some of the funding that we're looking to obtain so that we can do some stormwater studies in local neighborhoods. And part of that may involve future recommendations for rain gardens or stormwater wetlands. So to the extent that, even if we went with Emerald and Caribbean is here, watch how they're doing this. I reached out to Coastal Federation and I'm like, who should I reach out to? They had no idea.
Is this going to be the show place for the Outer Banks properly for a rain garden?
Say one more time.
Is this going to be like a show place for the Outer Banks for a rain garden? Or are there other ones on the Outer Banks now?
There aren't other ones on the Outer Banks now.
There are lots of them, but this will be one of the more accessible, visible ones, I would say.
I mean, we definitely intend to have some signage available.
Right, education.
Yeah, we've already spoken with Christian Legner about the development of that at some point once this is installed.
Yeah. Nancy's question was, of this thing caving in, we're only digging down 2 feet.
It's not likely it's going to cave in.
Right.
If anything, if I were to see a failure, it would be just the plants being planted too deep or not deep enough.
Right.
Or not in the right location in terms of the depth of the basin.
Well, it seems to me if we've written the specifications and they bid it and they've got business with the town and they like doing business with the town, and if they match, the specifications and we have a contract that protects us to an extent, we're going to save $6,000, which maybe we can reinvest somewhere else on the town property. I mean, I kind of like the idea of giving somebody a chance to prove themselves and give them a new experience. I mean, I kind of think this is not rocket science. And I mean, we're not building a major dam or something. This is just an $8,000 job with excavation and plants. And obviously if we've written specifications right, it seems to me the logical thing to do is go with a little bidder. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Don, and I understand that because it is a good deal of difference in the price. And I guess that what it comes down to is the whole, visibility or educational showcase aspect, if you will. Is that worth it? I don't know how, where that educational thing could go, but if it's something that, maybe the fact that there's specs now shows Caribbean what to do and they'll be, really good at it. I don't know, but I guess that's the difference for me. I'm still debating in my head. There's benefits on saving the 6,000, no question.
I mean, basically we're digging a ditch and planting plants that we specified, correct? And it's all laid out and some piping and.
There's concrete work in this also, isn't there?
I don't think so. I think
There's
it's
a
just
foot of
ties into, I don't have the plans in front of me.
There's a 4,000 pound concrete structure in the bottom of this thing that holds the water, it appears, according to this drawing that we have here.
I don't have the plan in front of me.
I mean, I think the other positive is you've got Karen B in here probably a couple days a week for the rest of the year. So if there's issues, they're right there. You don't have to wait and call them in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's definitely a plus for Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy,
Yep.
if there's other rain gardens like this on the beach, do we know who installed those? Was it any of these contractors that bid on this job?
Caribbean, or not Caribbean, Emerald Forest has done one down in Manio. And again, they've done a bunch in Virginia. Caribbean, I asked them for references similar in nature, and they gave me references, but they were just
There were different
typical
projects,
landscaping.
different kinds of projects.
Dragonfly Ponds, who was the third bidder, is they specialize in this kind of stuff, but they were out of Raleigh and they were higher. And then Whitehurst Sand Company, they're a concrete company.
You can scratch them right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, they came in at 22,000. So, sometimes in my experience working with bids, if you get bids that are really low or really high, that's typically because they don't know exactly what they're doing.
I think you're right about that.
I found that with beach planting when we first started doing it. I had a company that gave me a price that was super, super low. And I'm like, how are you able to do this? What is your manpower? And they couldn't answer my questions. So, that typically will tell me that they don't know exactly what they're getting themselves into. Now, this is a small project, so it's really, you can make a decision either way. If it boils down to cost, go with Caribbean. If it's a piece of this park that you want to ensure is going to go in right and look beautiful, then go with the experience. That's kind of what we do. What we did with the landscaping, we went with our experience for our centerpiece, which is the park and the boardwalk and the trail. The village is also, but it was a much smaller area, and our labor resources were taxed. That's why we split that up as well. So, when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at what's in the best interest for the town. And that is the choice that you need to make.
Well, I guess I look at it, if we can't manage the contractor that we hired to do the work and have them under contract, then shame on us. And I don't know, I mean, it's double the price. And Caribbean says they can do it, and we have a relationship with them, and I'm sure that, they would like more business with the town to
I'm sure.
supplement what they already have.
Absolutely. I'm sure they would.
Personally, I think cost outweighs experience in this regard because, I mean, once again, this is not the most complicated project in the world.
Have you sat down and reviewed the specifications with Caribbean?
No.
No, I'm just wondering if they forgot the concrete.
Oh, they got everything.
Oh,
I mean, all these guys have gotten all the plans.
they got the plans, but did they realize that there was concrete in the bottom of that drainage ditch?
Well,
That's almost $6,000 right there of concrete based on our sidewalk prices.
Mhm.
Is there concrete, Joe?
I don't recall seeing,
But well,
do you mind?
nope. Let me find the drawing for you.
I mean, if you wanted seepage, I can't believe there's concrete in there.
yeah, I'm kind of thinking that, but I don't understand the plans as
1,000
well.
pounds concrete.
I have a question while you're looking that up too, if I could.
Absolutely.
Is that her right there?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Darn, now, all of a sudden I just left it when I was looking up there. Let me think about it again. I think okay, just give me a second.
Detail right there.
Okay. So while y'all are thinking, I did want to just add, under this grant program with Dare County Soil and Water Conservation District,
Already there.
residential properties are eligible
Gives us told the slope here.
for this. So in other words, this project could serve as something that residents within Duck would choose to look at, and an individual resident can apply for that. A majority of the rain gardens that are in Dare County were built either by volunteer labor
3.2 feet.
or just individual contractors doing some, again, it's just a matter of creating a little bowl, selecting the right types of plants and doing that. So they're usually working, we're much, in having an engineer, we're in the top 10% of the projects they've reviewed, I'm sure. Most of the time it's done with sketches with the Dare County Soil and Water staff, working with an individual owner who's not as, there's no engineer involved in the project. So.
That was my question, Joe. If we have a quick second, thank you. It was regarding residential. Would anybody, and maybe you just answered this with regard to the grant, any resident have to go through that engineering drawing also to get, they would go through the same process that we did, even if you're residential on getting the permitting, you'd have to have that design before?
No, that was not a requirement of the grant that we have that. We got that because we wanted it. Because again, our project's a little different, and we're trying to resolve an existing problem with stormwater. So we really wanted to make sure that the grades were correct in being able to draw that water off of that problem area there
I don't understand.
and get it into this wetland area.
And I guess what I'm saying is if a resident wanted to kind of replicate what we're doing in the town and they wanted to do a rain garden, is that something that you always get a permit for?
Yeah, the only permit they need to get from us is and it really depends on the scale. If we're talking about some little, they probably don't need to get anything, but if they're talking about some pretty sizable, they would get a land disturbance permit for grading work. And that's all that would be involved from our standpoint.
So there is clearly some question on this design. There is a concrete weir in here. And I would perhaps suggest that you let me go back to Caribbean to make sure that they have factored that into their cost and confirm that. And then we can bring it back at the March meeting. We have time. They can't do this. Literally, you're not going to be able to get the plants until mid to late April, which is one of the reasons why the completion date is May 20th. So if there's question about whether that can be done, the project, including the concrete, for $8,000. Let me confirm that, and I'll bring it back at March.
I would prefer that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great
That was
suggestion.
my question, when you go over this with them.
But I raised a question. What, is that our engineers that put the concrete in the base?
I'm sorry, say that, I didn't quite understand.
That our engineers that actually did those drawings with the concrete?
It's not in the bay, it's a weir, which is sort of like think of it as a little dam,
Right.
if you will, on the,
Like a trough or-
this would be on the western edge of the pond.
So that's just a catch basin, maybe?
It's in, what happens is
Overflow.
this water, it's going to flow over the weir and then it drifts out through the rest of that wetland. That water goes all the way out behind this building here, behind the meeting hall, all the way out to the sound. So the weir kind of, it releases that water when it gets to a certain level so that the pond doesn't overflow and spread out.
So you're gonna go back and double check? Any other questions from council?
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, item number 7, new business. We have none at this time. Item number 8, items referred to in presentations to the town attorney. Robert?
No report this evening.
Thank you. Item number 9, items referred to in presentations to the town manager. Joe?
All right, Mayor. Just start off with a quick overview of the permit activity. Highlighted a couple of the key items for us. You can see there are 40 permits in January. While we look at last year and see 38, and that's a large number for us. So last year was a big year, and this was even a little bit bigger. You can see with the activity of 169, so that's a quarter of all the permits that we've issued for the year occurred in the past month. Going down, highlight a couple other odds and ends there. We did see an uptick in the trade permits, electrical, plumbing, HVAC and such. Pretty significant rise, up 42% from last year. And overall, in the number of permits, you can see we're up 20% from last year. I'll just really quickly walk through and highlight a few things. This time we did have a few clusters. Usually as I go through these maps, it spread out, but here we get in the area there with a lot of that's like Soundsea Village area that I've got circled there, where we see a good cluster of activity. And then going to south area, we've got one in the Cook Drive, Dune Road, Bayberry, that kind of area there, have a pretty good number of things going on, as well as Schooner Ridge. And then you see a cluster in the area we were just dealing with earlier with that special exception there along Duck Road, paralleling in that area, paralleling the sound. So just a couple, we did have 2 more new construction permits, one at 142 Dune Road and another at 107 Pamela Court. Some other significant renovation, rehab type projects, 101 Vario Way, 121 Sandy Ridge Road, 127 Spindrift Lane, 121 Widgeon Drive, 157 Bufflehead Road. And I'll leave that at that. And then just going on to highlighting a few of the projects that we've got going on. There we go. Came up with a different picture originally. Grading the bank at Four Seasons. I think everybody may have been aware of this as you passed in and out of town. But latter part of last week, Ben Vorndren, who was awarded the contract for this project, completed the grading to bring down that little hill that was blocking the view of people coming out of Four Seasons Lane. So remove that obstruction. You can see in this photograph all the way into the village. So now a much safer situation for vehicles pulling out of that intersection. Also wanted to recognize the efforts of our police department with their assistance in traffic control. That project is done with the exception of basically tossing some grass seed on there to begin the stabilization. This has been on our schedule here for a while. The weather has not cooperated well with the scouts, but we are still looking. We do hope that this will get done this weekend. Scout Troop 117. No? Did they nix it again? Okay, so we're looking at February 20th now, it appears, maybe the target date as far as getting those Christmas trees out on the beach to help with some of the dune stabilization. Our brick grant has officially been submitted to FEMA, so we did our revisions. Those went to the Department of Public Safety at the state level. They okayed it and forwarded our grant to FEMA. I can share with you that it scored very highly with their staff review during the process. And I guess now we're really in a waiting pattern as far as when we'll hear from them, but it'll be probably right around either very late spring, early summer that we would expect to get anything as far as information on if we've received that grant. The other grant that was submitted, Encore Resilient Coastal Communities Grant. This is the one I've talked about before. That's a phased grant. First phase has to do with data gathering. Second phase is studies. Third is more money for the implementation. It's over a 3-year period. We'll look at using this grant to address repetitive neighborhood flooding. And we submitted that grant earlier in January on the 15th. So that is in the process of being reviewed, and we should know something within a couple months. Then just a quick review here for beach nourishment. By the time the council meets again, we will have submitted for all of the state and federal permits. So CPE is in the process of working on that. And we anticipate those permits would be issued maybe late June, early July, bidding the project in August with construction the following year, summer of 2022. At the moment, our biggest task is working with neighborhood associations and Corps of Engineers on identifying areas that we can use in Duck or close, ideally in close proximity to the project area for the selected contractor to use as a staging area to get equipment and personnel on and off of the beach as needed. So Sandy has put in a lot of work on that particular element of the project. And that's all I had for you this evening as far as project highlights. So I'd like to invite Chief Black to share with you some things from the fire department.
Good evening once again, and I'm here to report out on duck fire for January 2021. We'll start with our normal slides of data. Let me get my clicker going here. Too quick. So January, we're going to see a duplicate slide because it's the first month, but we had 16 calls in January, and that's to date as well. Broken out, you can look at our specifics. We've had alarm activations and we've had rescue calls, which you'd expect. Our alarm activations have been everything from just battery malfunction to some construction work at one of the restaurants, a little bit of everything, none resulting in fire. And when you look at it in pie chart form, rescue 11 calls and also alarm activations were the 5 and 5 there. So when you go to the last slide, it's the same number this month, January 16. So you can see we're in our normal range of calls. We had a week with actually not one call, which is unusual. We usually get that once a year, and that was a January timeframe. Again, I think just with the conditions and COVID and things like that, that helps us too. Our activities for the month, we had 222 hours of training. We had 24 inspections. We're continuing our COVID response protocols. That hasn't changed. And then it was in the paper and even including a picture of me getting my shot. Fire vaccinations were January 23rd and then are followed up February 13th with the Pfizer vaccine. Also, Chief Ackerman and some of his folks were there as well, but that's when they captured most of public safety. So we'll follow up with our folks on February 13th. So again, we're approaching retreat, so my presentation isn't long tonight, but I'm almost got through everything on our CIP items. One's a big one with 800 radios, which we will bring up at a later date. But tonight for CIP, I'm going to go over extrication equipment real quickly so that you've got most of this completed before we go into budget time. So tonight I'm going to talk about extrication and vehicle and rescue extrication for us. We're very lucky here. We're in Duck. We have a high incidence of fender benders because we do have speed limits that luckily prevent things from being too serious. We're not out on the main highway. People aren't going hopefully 60, 70, 80 miles an hour where you can really have some damage and a lot of injury. Regardless, firefighters need to be trained for the event where we might have to disentangle someone out of a vehicle, and I'll show you some pictures in a minute. And the steps for us on any type of scene, whether it's a simple fender bender or it gets more complicated when we use the equipment, I'll show you in a minute, we're gonna stabilize the scene, make sure the scene's safe for the vehicles and pedestrians, take care of the vehicles. We wanna get to the victims to see how hurt they are. And then as it gets more complicated with the incidents, we're gonna need to disentangle those victims, meaning remove the vehicle around them so that we can remove the victims and then get them to proper treatment. Luckily, we don't have a lot of calls for this, which also is a budgetary impact because we don't have to replace equipment quite as often as other areas would, which I'll show you in a minute. So these are just some pictures of and you've seen these through our presentations or probably through police presentations. These are a couple pictures of some incidents we've had. Both of these, we were able to access patients or they were out of the vehicle simply. You don't see cars cut up here, but again, just these simple little incidents can be simple or they can be more complicated just based on what's happening with the people inside. Two more pictures, and the picture I know on what is my left, it's a car on a car, and you look at that, and I showed this picture a few years ago. That picture is actually in a neighborhood that's not even on a main road. That's just someone not paying attention and lost control of their car and landed on a parked car in literally a driveway. And I don't know what happened to this picture in translation or that one. They were fine when I started. This was just another example. And then when we stage equipment, I don't know what's wrong with the picture. It was fine a few minutes ago. On the left is all the possible equipment we can use. So I'll go to the picture on the right, just under staging for extrication. We put out a yellow tarp and we have all kinds of equipment. We have hydraulic spreaders, we have saws, we have hand tools, and unfortunately the picture on the left isn't showing it. It has everything laid out. We don't pull all that out for every single call, but that's all the potential stuff we could use on a complicated incident. So if you look at the engine there, that's engine 11, that carries the majority of our extrication equipment. It has the most cribbing, it has the most complete set of extrication equipment on it, but engine 111, we have now over time with the CIP been able to also put spreaders and cutters and things like that on there. And I'll show you some examples of some equipment. Below is a power unit. So that's a power unit that works for our tools that helps them function basically. To give you an idea, that power unit's $8,000. Okay, so when you look at this stuff, there's price tags to them, and I'll get to that in a minute. So everyone knows the jaws of life. You watch TV and everyone's like, oh, the jaws of life, that's what these are. We call them spreaders, not the jaws of life. A lot of our calls are this, we're just popping a door. So you can see Lauren, one of our volunteers on the left, we're simulating that the door won't open on its own. There's a victim there, we need to get him out. And then we show her not only popping the door, but actually taking the door off. That's an example of some of our extrication equipment. And trust me, I won't go through everything. These are rescue jacks. These are great pieces of equipment. Just a simple picture on the left with just the utility truck. It's a way to stabilize vehicles. This gets really important for us when we have an overturned vehicle, whether it's on pavement or off the roadway somewhere, to be able to stabilize that victim so we can, or the vehicle, so we can get victims out if necessary. And on the left is the power picture. On the right is the simple tool of a reciprocating saw, which a lot of us have at home to do home projects. That's actually a piece of extrication equipment. We can cut the roof off. We can do other things with it. So we don't always need the big stuff like the jaws of life. But again, these pictures are just to give you an idea of all the different types of stuff. So when I ask for $7,000 in extrication equipment every couple of years, it's either replacing some small stuff or getting a big item, and I'll show some prices in a minute. And this slide here is hand tools, and the reason I kept Jared's picture there where he's got the saw, we don't, as I said, not everything's big. So we carry around that little basket on the left. It has everything from a glass cutter to pliers, just little stuff, because that's actually also part of our hand tools and accessories that we need. That doesn't really fall under the extrication CIP piece. We can cover that within, but it's important to know we may just need a couple little tools and not be pulling out those big jaws of life. So just so you understand, the nature of what we use depends on the nature of the call. But the important thing for us from a budgetary standpoint is I need to make sure that either engine has enough equipment, has the right equipment to do that. It's just like planning for a fire. There are days where we have to cut folks out, and it is necessary that we use the bigger stuff. So how often do we need to get the bigger stuff? So let's talk about costs real quick. We look at those yellow things called rescue jacks. They're $6,200. We may not buy another set of rescue jacks in my time, maybe not even in Trey's time, unless things change. So we have two sets on engine 11, engine 111, so that no matter what vehicle's out, we can stabilize a vehicle. Hydraulic tools, such as the jaws of life that you saw, the spreaders, that's on the $6,000 range. But we also use something called rams that might only be $2,500. So the range depends on the tool. If we get a battery operated one, it's $10,000 a tool. So that just gives you an idea that prices are all over the place, and we'll get to replacement in a minute. Airbags and airbags were in the picture that unfortunately didn't come through. It's just a way to lift a vehicle. If we need to lift a vehicle off a person, those have a shelf life. They're the only thing that has a shelf life, and they can range from $800 to $1,000. Reciprocating saw, you all own, several people own them. They can be between $100 and $200. And then any of those hand tools are $100+. So just give you an idea, it's all over the place. That's why I give you $7,000, because it may just be, we needed rescue jacks. I think we got those 3 years ago, or we're trying to replace smaller stuff that adds up to about that. So that's why I never want to come to you with a $40,000 big tool extrication purchase. I just want to make sure we stay ahead. The big thing with the spreaders, we can use them, but we might need new tips. That's not $6,000. That might be $1,000. So that's why I have priced your CIP budget item at $7,000, so we can cover the things as we need it. And when you look at CIP, I think I asked for it for 2 years, take a year off and do 2 more, because it's not a high need, but we got to stay ahead of it. So when I'm looking at replacement considerations, and what I bring to you with the $7,000 is, We'll phase things in when there's an age issue, if there's failures, or technological advancements. I can tell you the firefighters at some point are going to want battery-operated hydraulic tools. There's going to be a price tag to that. So we'll have a conversation. It means selling the other tools and replacing, but we wouldn't add on to necessarily. We want to maintain uniformity and interface properly. So I can't pick a Hearst tool. We carry Amicus, so I can't flip and flop because then we won't have any redundancy. But what we've been able to do to really change the lifespan of our tools, we sent a couple guys, actually 3 have gone now, to Amicus School, the technician school, to learn how to repair the actual hydraulic tools. So we can do that in-house, get them fixed quicker, keep them in service, and it also helps us for preventative maintenance. And that's where we get the $7,000 requests every couple of years. So that's a little overview. Sorry about the one picture. It's my favorite picture to show all the different types of equipment. But again, that's where I get the $7,000. So it can cover little items or it might cover something different like a hydraulic tool. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you.
I have a
And
question.
then
Monica's
lastly,
got one. Monica has a question.
sure. Oh, sorry, Monica.
Well, thanks. I appreciate the overview of what you're needing. Is it every year or when you do submit the budget, are you spending the full amount or I haven't really paid that granular attention. I'm going to look at it more now, but is it ever like, that you're giving back budget money, or are you really finding ways that you can really use this money for anything to do with this kind of?
Great question. We don't ask every year. And again, this past year is a great example. We didn't ask for anything this year. I think 2 years ago, we used it all because we got rescue jacks. And then what we'll do is add, if we didn't get everything we needed with the rescue jacks, we'll add some pieces. So we try to make sure that we're meeting that. And we'll hold off on getting something if we need it. But if it's one of those things, unless I come to you and say, oh my God, the spreaders are broken and we really need to replace them on a year we're not offering, usually it's something we can tie into the next year when we ask for it. So the hard part is spreaders are $6,200. Rescue jacks, that's a one-time item. So saws, sometimes we need to replace. The blades are more. So that's when you'll see us spend $7,000, but in little amounts to replace the little accessory tools. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. And again, yesterday was a very sad day for us at Duck Fire. Many of you know Boyd Brandon. He joined us in January of 2009. And he's a typical volunteer for us, right? He came here, retirement, wanted to get involved, joined the fire department, became one of our very, very, very consistent driver operators. He's known as Chef 11. He used to bring in breakfast burritos on Monday mornings. He cooked all the hot dogs you've all had at our fire prevention night. And he left us yesterday to go back out west and be with some family. But he gave us great 11 years, and we'll really, really miss him. But I wanted to do a shout out to Boyd. I don't think anyone in here doesn't know Boyd. And it was a sad day yesterday when he came in to say goodbye. That was actually Monday. He was still in town yesterday morning. But we thank him for everything he did for the fire department. He will be missed, part of the family. And then that's all I have tonight. I look forward to the retreat and expanding on Duck Fire and where we are. And I'll touch on CIP, but that's what I've been trying to do, the 101s. One last thing quickly, finally had an opportunity on Friday afternoon to have lunch with Chief Ackerman, Lieutenant Clark, Deputy Chief Bachelet, and myself. Now that everyone has settled in, if you look at it, I've been there a while, but those 3 are in new positions all in the last year. So we had a great lunch meeting, about a 2-hour lunch meeting to talk about internally within the building, how we can streamline some things with ordering supplies, and also just operationally talking through some things, especially in anticipation that Christian's going to come with us with some new ideas around events. So we had a really good 2-hour meeting, and we're going to try to do that minimum quarterly, but it was great couple hours. So thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. And that's all I have, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you. Chief Ackman, you want to go ahead and start up?
So that picture that was missing from Chief Black's presentation, that was actually her making a muscle after she got her shot. And I sabotaged it because I felt inadequate when I got mine. Thank you, and thank you, Chief Black. The lunch we had Friday was definitely long overdue. Chief Black and I get to talk very frequently, but to get our staffs together and really kind of set some groundwork as to where we're going in 2021 was hugely helpful, and we're very much on the same page with every issue. So great opportunity and great lunch. That really wasn't planned, but that segues me into the first topic I want to talk about today is our public safety interoperability. We hear the word constantly, but what it really means is integrating things to make sure it works between the two departments. And a couple places we found ways to do that are we needed to purchase respirator gas masks for our officers. And generally, they're very expensive for a police-designed face mask. Deputy Chief Bachelet, when I went to him and asked about suppliers where I could get something, suggested that we could take the standard fire department issue face masks that they use with their self-contained breathing apparatus. And there is actually an adapter, a $49 adapter to that, and then roughly an $80 cartridge that goes on that. And it essentially becomes a fully functional gas mask, meets every specification. But the beauty of it is they have plenty of them. So rather than me go and buy 12 masks we may never need, we've just decided to buy 3 of them now to issue just to the folks that'll be going to the statewide civil unrest team training. And then we're going to buy a handful of cartridges and adapters. And then in the future, if we need them, we can borrow some of the inventory from Chief Black or continue to add them. But it roughly a 55% cost savings over going out and buying standalone gas masks. So it proved to be a great first step, and really can't say enough about Deputy Chief Bachelet and working with me on that and steering me in that direction. We're also looking at some plans surrounding the 800 megahertz radios, something we'll bring to you down the line. Also, along the same lines, I've got 3 different makes and models of AEDs deployed with my officers. And with each make and model comes pads, batteries, nothing's interchangeable. So one of the proposals we're going to make for this year is to completely replace all of the police department's AEDs, but we'll use a model that's identical or nearly identical to what the fire department carries. So we'll be able to share supplies. Rather than me have 3 or 4 batteries and pads, if I need something, I can come to Chief Black, vice versa, and then we can replace it. So there would be a nice cost savings as far as keeping them up to date going forward. And then as far as training, both of our departments will be trained on those machines and be able to deploy them. So there's no getting an unfamiliar machine when you're on the scene. So I think that's just the start of a lot of projects that we'll be able to collaborate on and ensure interoperability between our departments. Want to report to you that we have, through the efforts of Jackie Keene, we have signed on with the ATF's E-Trace system, which is a web-based application used to track the purchase and history of weapons used in violent crimes. Not something that we have to deal with every day, but we absolutely recover an unbelievable number of firearms every year here in Duck. And generally what happens is folks bring them on vacation, leave them in a drawer in their rental home, and then we end up recovering them. It creates a number of issues for us as far as tracing and proving ownership. So while this is not something we tend to expect to use daily, it's going to be a great resource for us and something that may help going forward. So we've joined 7,800 other agencies within the country that are currently using this E-Trace system. And then just to kind of give you a walkthrough of how it works, we recover the firearm, we can run it through, get an E-Trace on it, and then it's also in the system. So if another agency has that particular firearm in a case they're involved in, we've got record of it. So Pretty simple system. As I said, very easy web-based system. So looking forward to having that. I'm really excited that next month, March, we'll have our next unused medication drop-off event. The last one was hugely successful. So hoping that we can do this again. I'm going to be asking Christian to help me publicize this as she did last time, because I think she was really the key to getting the word out. So looking forward to that. We did have what I refer to as a significant arrest this month or past month. It kind of proves that law enforcement can either be 90% luck and 10% skill or the other way around. But in this case, interesting story. We got a call from Currituck County that they had received a call from Virginia State Police about a vehicle that was down here. The driver of the vehicle was wanted in Virginia for making terroristic threats up there. As Sergeant Joe Knight got the information, he checked the LPR database, found that that car had crossed over northbound into Currituck County, but had not returned. As he was entering it into a watch list, which would have alerted us when it came back across, lo and behold, he looks up and the car is going in front of him as he's sitting on the side of the road. So he was able to stop the car, serve the fugitive warrant, and then also was able to charge the gentleman with displaying fictitious license plates. Interestingly enough, they were the correct plates on the wrong vehicle, and then a couple of drug violations as a result of that. So we were able to help agencies up in Virginia get this case solved for them, and we were able to do it in a safe manner. So really, again, proved how valuable our LPR system is. Call volume for January, we're down 1%. I still think that's indicative of the fact that we've got two of our newest officers in their partial portion of BLET, and then the third one is still in field training. So that cuts down on some of the self-initiated activity that we normally would see. And we did get our COVID vaccines, as Chief Black spoke about, and then we'll get the second round on the 13th. So no major issues with anybody who got the vaccine. So, so far, so good on that. The one thing I do want to point out, especially to you, Mr. Mayor, as you sit on these committees, I could not have been more impressed with what I saw at the event. My understanding, they vaccinated over 1,100 people. It was the most smoothly run operation. I felt safe. I just cannot say enough about what Dare County Health Department, Emergency Management, EMS, and Vidant put together. So just remarkable. I think if Dare County could handle vaccines for this country, we'd be done already. But I might be biased. I want to just highlight one thing on the January stats. Business checks are up this time of year. Our two biggest concerns are vacant rental properties and our businesses at night. So we're spending a huge amount of time in both those sectors, and that's where the bulk of our activity is. Radar sign data's there. The two things that have jumped out at me are the maximum speeds of 54 and 59 miles an hour. As we're getting newer officers trained in radar, I believe that we'll be able to continue to make an impact in speed enforcement through enforcement and then also education like we've done over the years. Won't go too much into the car counts for January as they're beginning to level off as to where they should be this time of year. But that data, again, is all available on the website. And then lastly, just a picture of Jason Garrett, our sergeant, and Jackie Keene. And just want to say to council again, thank you for everything, the support you've given. We have probably the most cohesive team that we've seen ever in Duck Police history. Just a great sense of workmanship between the different squads. Everybody just is doing remarkable things, and everybody comes to work with a smile every day. So I think a lot of that's the environment that the town has created for us. So thank you. If there's any questions. All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. And Christian, if you'd like to come forward to offer our public information.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, good evening, everyone. And all of you on the TV up there. So I'm going to be pretty brief tonight because Betsy and I have a lot of really fun things to bring to you at the retreat. But obviously, we're continuing to work on our public health guidelines, continuing to work with the health department to put that information out, continuing to make sure our message and assets also align with what the state is putting out. So case numbers, hospitalizations, and the percent of positive tests are stabilizing across the state but remain high. And vaccine registration information is online at the Dare County DHHS website, and that is linked on our website if anyone has questions. We also continue to send out those weekly updates from Dare County in our e-news. We're still working on the OBX alert transition. So that is what used to be called Regroup. Our text message and phone call and email alert system is switching to another company called Rave. It will be across the Outer Banks called Outer Banks Alerts, and it's countywide. So there will be a PSA airing soon. Well, actually two. There'll be a video PSA and an audio PSA for radio coming out. So we'll have some new collateral to be pushing on our channels to help people switch over to that. Duck has a pretty good number of people who have switched over already. We also will be updating our beach signage before Memorial Day weekend, something I need to work on now. I just got the new text to join number for OBX beach conditions. So when we spec'd out those signs, I made sure to ask, was it easier to make a blank there and put a sticker on in case it ever changed, or just print it and then put a sticker on? And they said just to print it and put a sticker on. So Access Design will be designing little stickers for us to update those numbers, and we'll be updating our brochure as well. I've also been working with Sandy and Joe on, I made it sound really grand, litter reduction in Ducktown Park. What it really is moving the trash cans. We've consolidated the trash cans more towards parking areas within the park, because on the boardwalk we have found that particularly in the high season, if the trash cans are overflowing, people will still attempt to put trash in there and items will be blown out onto the boardwalk and into the sound. So we're trying to make it easier for people to have centralized places for trash cans and to make better use of our big belly systems, which obviously have those big, huge doors that close and keep trash from blowing. So we have some ads going out about that right now, and if it'll let me play. Oh, sorry, it's loud. I can't turn it down from up here. So this animation has already gone out. Right now, I'm kind of working on the premise of, we're famous for our wind here for lots of reasons, and to help people understand why we have moved some trash cans to more centralized locations. So you will see more of that coming out. Looking ahead, planning for 2021 in the age of COVID. Betsy and I have been working hard. We've attended lots of webinars and virtual meetings about event planning, both things that occurred last year and things that organizations are doing this coming year. And we recently held a meeting with other event planner representatives in the county, and the health department joined us. So that was a really helpful discussion to kind of get everyone on the same page about when we think we might have events starting, what types of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Q, Z plans we might have to make to get through those. So that was a really helpful meeting, and I'm very grateful to the health department for making time to join us in that short meeting. And we'll be bringing you all that information at the retreat once we have time to sit down and get that all worked out. Our brochure production is underway. This is just a mock-up right here. We're working on design right now. We usually aim to have them out before Easter. Last year with COVID, it came out a little bit later. This year, we're still gonna try and get it out on that time, but depending on how event planning goes and some of the things we'll talk to you about the retreat will give us a better timeline on that. And we also are eligible to apply for the ARPO grant that usually pays for a portion or all of the printing costs. So thank you to Joe for managing that. Black History Month, Betsy has embarked on a daily post about Black history, and it's been really great so far. She's working on local, state, and national Black history stories, tying as many stories as possible into our local area, getting as close to Eastern North Carolina as she can, spreading out to North Carolina, and then some really notable events nationally. We're also cross-posting a little bit on the Duck Jazz Festival page, particularly about musicians. Beachgrass plantings continue, and we are sending those out on the e-news. Sandy has done a great job organizing everyone so that they are socially distant and COVID compliant. I know that's a lot of work, so thank you, Sandy. Oh, and then our LPDI funding was awarded. As everyone knows, the amount of money you could apply for was cut in half this year to $5,000. So when we applied this year, we asked for a dedicated laptop for video editing, because when we do that work on our desktops, when it's rendering or exporting, it takes up a lot of computer brain time, and I can't do much else for about an hour while it's doing that. So having a separate laptop to be able to do that will be great. Plus we can share it around with anyone else who needs to video edit. And then the rest of the money, we'll work with Baldwin Video to refresh our town PSAs and informational videos, as well as start planning videos for the 20th anniversary next year.
Great. That's great.
And that is all I have. I'm gonna, if you guys have questions, great, but I'm gonna step back here and switch it so they can talk as well.
Are there any questions for Christian?
No? Okay.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you very much. All right. As we just left the topic, Sandy, are we having a beach planning tomorrow? Yes, 1 o'clock Plover Drive. Okay, so 1 o'clock Plover Drive for those who are interested. Okay. Mayor, did want to, I guess, roll right into the next thing. There was not a whole lot more left. We don't have the financial stuff was not provided to us in time to get it together for you. So we will, Teresa Osborne and I will put that together and get that out to you as soon as we can get those reports together. We're still awaiting some of the information. So I'll just focus on the council retreat. I know last meeting we went through a little more thoroughly. I don't intend to do that tonight, but did just want to highlight for the council. We will be getting together February 17th, 8:45, gather together. Please let Christian know for those who are going to be participating virtually. I'm sure she'll be in touch with you on that. But that'll be February 17th, 8:45. On the 18th, we meet again, and that'll be at 9 o'clock that we'll get together and begin that. Just it'll be 15 minutes later on that date. Obviously, during the course of that event, we'll cover a variety of things as we previously discussed. The first day will focus on a lot of our external partners, the financial overview that gives us the context, CPE, VHB, the MAPS group, and then we'll have time for some other discussion as well as needed. And then the second day will focus on more of the internal opportunity for all of the departments to share with you where they are at and highlight some of the things that they're looking at moving forward, different projects, initiatives, and needs that they have that you'll go on to consider during your budget process. Mayor, that's all I had for you this evening otherwise.
Thank you very much, Joe. Going to item number 10, the mayor's agenda, a few things. First of all, my bi-weekly meetings with the other mayors, chairman, and others, such as the superintendent of parks and schools, et cetera, continue to talk about COVID. We had an emergency meeting last week. Of course, there was a lot of publicity about that. Unsuspecting to us, we got a shortage of vaccines as they were diverted to a major event in Mecklenburg County. The state did apologize back. I think we recovered fairly well here in Dare County, although we may have still been short a couple hundred doses for what was planned last week. I think Jeff made the comment, and I think Dare County is doing an excellent job with the vaccinations, and everybody who has gone and gotten a vaccination, first or second shot, has said nothing but glowing comments about how well organized it is. And I know several of us will be getting our second shots next week, but it's run very, very efficiently and very effectively by the county. And I think we stand out based upon that. And of course, the better we perform, the more doses we're going to get, which is excellent. Secondly, and for those that didn't know, although I think I probably said this a couple times during our town manager search, but Drew Havens, who I believe is on the phone this evening, and I both serve on the NCL League, the board of directors. And there was some question whether or not we could both continue to serve. They made changes to the Constitution several years ago. I'm an elected board member from District 1. Drew is appointed from one of the affiliate organizations. The organizations are town managers, town clerks, and lawyers. And as such, he's appointed by that organization. So by the Constitution of the league, there's no conflict. So Drew and I can now both continue to serve through the end of our terms, which is kind of good news for Duck. We're probably the smallest population represented on the board, and we have the most members, so out of 35. So that's a little bit humorous. Speaking of that, I do have a finance committee meeting virtually on the 16th, and Drew and I both serve on the finance committee, so he'll also be on that call, I would imagine, which will probably be his first day here in Duck. We have a board meeting, two-day board meeting for the league on the 25th and 26th. Once again, that'll be virtual. The last time the board met was in Duck last February, so it seems like forever since the league board hasn't been able to meet. And lastly, with respect to the league, I got a call the other day and they've asked me, and I've accepted to be appointed to the League Leadership Foundation for the coming year. And that's going to be very interesting. And not only is it league, but we also include the School of Government. So it should be an interesting year with respect to that foundation. Once again, I'd like to thank Christian, Betsy, Joe, entire town staff for a very successful winter celebration. It was certainly different this year, but I think you pulled off, and I think everyone enjoyed being on the call, and it was good to make that recognition of town staff and town councils and boards. Looking forward to the annual retreat. It's always a good event. It's going to be quite different this year. Yeah, we won't have the 11 o'clock rush for lunch. So instead of feeding the town, we'll be feeding ourselves. So, but I am looking forward to that, and it's always a great event, and it'll be good for Drew as he comes to work that week to get a good overview of the town. And with that, other than looking forward to Drew's arrival, I'd like to once again publicly thank Joe for his dedication and leadership since last July as interim town manager. Thank you, Joe. And with that, we'll go to item number 11, council members' agenda. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau. Monica?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. I just have a few things to remarks tonight. Thank you for the opportunity. Definitely want to welcome Drew. Very excited. Perfect time to come and see the town. And it's nice that you've been able to join us on a few of our meetings so far. So very excited to welcome Drew and his family. Also just wanted to say, generally, I'm super appreciative and impressed with the reports tonight of talking about economies of scale and also just really, sincerely looking at, what's good for the town. Just a lot of good skill level. I mean, we just have an amazing staff, and I just want to thank everybody for their commitment and just always trying to look at how we can do things better. That to that end, I also was a little worried about how I might digest the financial reports that we're getting now with Teresa Osborne, but I've really been delighted with that so far. Looking forward to, again, taking these reports for a while and seeing, if there's any other suggestions, but, certainly that half year, year-over-year report that we get, plus the broken down by categories pretty distinctly categorically. I really enjoyed that a lot. And, it was having it for us at the forefront of perhaps other information. I just really appreciated that. So I wanted to thank her firm and all that she's doing to help us through the accounting that we need. And, everything's looking great there. Also just one of the things we heard was the idea about education and for our citizens. And, just sort of one of the things we can do is just set an example for the community at large there on the Outer Banks, and people look to the town, but also, just helping our residents along with education and the best practices and how, and just, or other communities with some of our larger projects. So I'm really, and something I would like to put a finger, pulse on in terms of just education. I think our websites do an amazing job, and people really need to tap into what we're doing, and any way we can improve guiding the public on the best practices I think is really going to be great. So that's just something for the future that I think that's everything. Oh, just to say that I did join the Outer Banks Visitors Bureau as our duck representative, back on that board after about, I think, 5 years off. Really happy to be there, and I'm serving as the assistant treasurer, I believe, is the name of the, so I'm very involved with all that, and I'm going to be reporting out, we had town manager reporting on behalf of Chuck, or maybe Christian, when he was in that role. So I'll be presenting some details, and maybe even during the, some succinct details for you, certainly, and getting those back to you, but that hasn't started yet. First meeting I attended was just a few days ago. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
No baby yet, in case anybody's wondering.
Councilmember Cavanagh, Nancy.
Good evening, everybody. Well, I'd just like to echo the compliments that have already been offered by Dawn and Monica with respect to the staff and their leadership and their dedication to the principles and the values of the community, and really going that extra step, going above and beyond, and really setting some high benchmarks for our town and the community at large. It doesn't go unnoticed, and I know a lot of times efforts like that go unthanked. So to anybody that's listening, thank you. It's very much appreciated. I had my first government access meeting last week remotely on the 28th. So I heard lots of voices, but I didn't see any faces because we did it through a phone system. But it was fun to be on the call and approve our grant. So that Christian had explained that we got that LDPI grant for $5,000, and so that was very exciting. And that's all I have tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Councilmember Mooney. Rob, looks like you're a little under the weather, and I hope you're hanging in there. Thank you.
I am. Yeah, I'm sorry about making all that noise. No, I have nothing.
Thank you, Rob. Get better. Councilmember Whitman.
I have nothing this evening.
Thank you, Sandy. Move on to item number 12, other business. Are there any other couple of comments that came in, Christian? So there'll be none. We'll go on to, there's no other business to come before the council this evening. We'll go on to item number 13. I'm going to ask Sandy if he would read the motion for us to go into closed session.
To enter into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.115 to establish instruct a public body staff or negotiating agents concerned the position taken by or on behalf of public body in negotiating the price or other material forms of a contract or proposed contract for acquisition of real estate located at 103 Scarborough Lane, owned by Larry Herring, Thomas Herring, Cassie Herring, and property located at 165 Duck Road, owned by Larry Herring, Tom Herring, Deborah Herring, Vicky Herring, and Kathleen Herring, by purchase, option, exchange, or lease.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? We'll do a roll call vote to go into closed session. Mayor votes aye. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau? We saw your hand, but we didn't hear you, but that's all right. Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney?
Aye.
Councilmember Sandy?
Aye.
We're now in closed session. We are now out of closed session, and I'd like to ask Town Attorney Robert Hobbs if he would give the report back.
Thank you, Mayor. The council in closed session gave instructions to town staff regarding the property that was discussed during the closed session, but otherwise no action was taken or needed.
Thank you, Robert. I'll just remind council our next meeting is going to be the annual retreat at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, February 17th, and 9 a.m. on Thursday, Friday, February 18th. And with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The meeting is now adjourned.